Well, good afternoon and welcome to week 12 of True Normal. The name is Rolf van der Merwe and I'm a director at Van der Merwe Robertson Attorneys. It's a special word of welcome to my three colleagues, Christelle, George and Eugene, and then to Theo Vorster, CEO of Galileo Capital. I think after 12 weeks, Theo needs no further introduction. And he will also assist again today in facilitating the conversation with our guest speaker. You've also now just heard our guest speaker, Frank Kilbourn. Frank, welcome. He's the chairman of Strauss and Company and co-founder, director at the Bright Group of Companies. And then also to Ewoud Derksen, he's the managing director at 1001 Voices. And Ewoud will have the final say, thank both Theo and Frank, and conclude our session. They say in the MBA language, they speak of unique value proposition, UVP. This refers to the ability to ask intydse vrae. Now, in my best English translated, it means asking the right questions in the right time. So this UVP is what Van der Merwe and Robertson and Galileo Capital are trying to achieve since we've started this platform, even take 12 weeks ago. The primary aim of trying to understand where we find ourselves today, that's within level 3 lockdown and in a post-COVID world. Those who have been with us over the last few weeks are friends and business partners of both Van der Merwe Robertson Attorneys and Galileo Capital, or you were invited by a friend or a business partner to join in on this group. So last week's session, where our guest speaker was Dr. Fiona Kritzinger, has already been watched by almost 600 people. And I would like to appeal to you today to assist us in finding the right questions, the intydse vrae, or the time frame that we find ourselves in. And I would like to urge you to send me your questions, topics for discussion, or relevant guest speakers you would recommend or would like us to approach. This platform, True Normal, is as much ours as it is yours. And as I previously said, we are all in the same COVID storm, just all in separate boats. So let me introduce our guest speaker, Frank Kilbourn. Frank is the executive chairperson of Strauss and Company, Africa's largest art auction house. Frank himself is a modern and contemporary Southern African art collector, founder of Bright Resource Group, which focuses on private equity and venture capital. Frank is also involved in the tourism industry and he currently serves as the lead independent director on the board of City Lodge Hotels and is a director of numerous other tourism-driven companies, including the Village and Life Group. He serves on the South African Tourism Board for 10 years, of which 3 he sat as chairperson. Frank holds degrees in law, commerce, and philosophy. He also started his career as an attorney, then became a merchant banker, and today he's a businessman. He's further very much involved in the community with a specific focus on education, nature conservation, and the promotion of arts and culture. Today, we've asked Frank to entertain 2 topics. First, arts and art as an asset class within South Africa and internationally. And secondly, as a businessman, to talk about the tourist and hospitality industry within the Western Cape, South Africa, and also internationally. More than welcome on this platform to ask questions to both Frank and Theo. And when asking a question, just state your name and the business that you represent, and go ahead and ask your question. Frank, I take it you can hear me. The floor is yours. We're looking forward to your conversation.
Thank you very much, Rolf. It seems to me in these times, the one qualification one needs is in technology, because that's the thing that makes a difference between surviving or not. But thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join all of you today. I see quite a few people I know, so if I make any mistakes, any of them who know me well can correct me at any point in time. So I'm going to try and see if I can get everything running here on my screen. And if whether you can see whether that's on.
Yes, it's on, Frank.
Okay, let me just make that big. Okay, if you got the Strauss & Company logo, that should be clear enough. I wanted to share some thoughts with you today, and I won't, unfortunately, Rolf, not be able to cover all the topics you mentioned there, but we can touch upon them briefly. I want to tell you a little bit about the history of Strauss & Company, because it's interlinked with the South African art scene, and to share with you how we face the challenges faced by COVID-19 and how we believe we've overcome them, and then to share some thoughts with you on the tourism industry. So the nice thing to know is that art in South Africa, if I share that 11-year history of Strauss & Company, we must actually go much further back than that. And South Africa is one of the oldest art nations in the world. Some of the oldest art sites in the world are found in South Africa. It's 30,000 years old. So I would argue that we have a very good base to treat art as a very precious investment in this country. Just for interest's sake, in 1860, we had the first professional art exhibition in South Africa. In 1880, we already had the first art school open, and 1917, we had the first art auction in South Africa. So there's a very well-established art history in South Africa. A little bit about Strauss & Company. We are the leading art auction house in South Africa, I would say. We have, I think, in excess of 75% market share of the secondary market. It was founded in 2009 by the late Stefan Welz, an icon of the South African art industry. We have since held 56 live auctions. We introduced online auctions to South Africa, and we've had 36 auctions since. In total, we sold almost 28,000 items over those 10.5 years for a total consideration of approximately 2.5 billion rand. And we're really, to a certain extent, a bit of a stock exchange of the secondary art market. Our job is to provide liquidity to the art market, bring buyers and sellers together on a platform that is transparent and effective. Some innovations recently, we introduced a fine wine sale division in July 2019. With just 1 year old, and we already had 2 white glove sales, which is a sale in which you sell every single event that's for sale listed on the auction. In 2020, just to say where we are up to the year up to date, notwithstanding all the challenges and trepidation, we've been very fortunate in achieving 120 million rand in art sales, and we have done 2 of our 5 main sales, and we've seen a very strong growth in online sales this year, and I'll come back to that later. Just to take you a little bit on the journey that we've had, this graph will show you how many items we sold, and you can see that there's been a steady increase from 657 items in the first year of sale to 5,860 last year, and we sold more than 1,800 items already this year. So there's obviously a demand for items to be sold on this platform, and this gives you an idea of the turnover that we've generated. Bit of long numbers, but we started with 102.8 million in the first year. Our record year was 2017, when we achieved 320 million rand worth of sales. It was a bit slower in 2018 with the general economic conditions. It started really biting us in the second half of that year, carrying into the beginning of the next year. Then we had an incredibly, surprisingly strong 2019 with 318 million. And this year we sort of at the moment on an equivalent basis tracking somewhere between 2018 and 2019. And I'm sure Theo later can give us some thoughts on how that correlates with what has happened with the stock exchange over these years. just to give you an indication, what do people buy? 92% of it are paintings and sculpture. And then a number of items, if we look at the next slide, gives you a better idea. Oh, that's online. If we just go back there, the second biggest item really being jewelry, and then silver and so forth, decorative arts. We only recently started selling wine, and it's yet to make its mark overall. On the online sales, it's actually quite interesting, because there you can see that something like wine is already in the second position there, together with jewelry and silver. It's about 5% of turnover. But, you know, to decorative arts, 8%, but to a large extent, as you can see from both these slides, we're very much driven by paintings and sculpture as a business. This is what happened with us on online sales, and it's quite interesting per year. We started in the first year in 2013, and there was no sort of, we started this online platform business in South Africa. No one else was doing it for several years. We're one of the first companies in the world to do it, auction company. So first year we generated 2.3 million. It grew quite rapidly to 21 million, and then it stayed sort of static. Our best year there, 2017, same as with live at 21.8 million. Then it came down a little bit after that. The interesting thing is, yeah, that we will see shortly how well online has performed this year. So just again, online sales is a percentage of turnover, and I'll come back to you in a minute why I'm sort of emphasizing online sales, is that you'll see very rapid increase this year. This year up to now, 14.6% of our sales have been online. And I think that is something that will echo with many businesses, where the utilization of digital platforms has increased very significantly. And we see our clients migrating to these platforms in an ever greater extent. So you can see from this thing that ever since we started online sales, it's really become embedded in our business, and at the percentage we just said below, up to now, the biggest to date. Now, if we talk about the collectibility of South African art, what I tried to demonstrate to you in the first couple of slides is that we actually have a very nice growing business. The line, there's a quite significant compound growth from 10 years ago in turnover till now, and that there's an ever increasing increase in the number of items that's being placed on this platform. So who are the artists that are driving the sale? So it is very interesting, and that we're really dominated by 4 artists. The first one, Irma Stern, as you can see here, she has 38% of all sales that we've generated since 2009, and in terms of turnover, has been generated by Irma Stern, which is actually a phenomenal number, I think. The second is Pierneef at 17%, then Alexis Praller. So between those 3 artists alone, they've got 58% of South African secondary art market. But what is quite interesting is that the only living artist among them, which is William Kentridge, already has an 8% share of the market. And given that he's still relatively young compared to all of the others who are no longer with us, and if you look at his international sales, he will definitely have the potential to become the top-selling South African artist over time. Okay, that gives you an idea of how much did we sell for these artists. And I think it's a phenomenal number. If you think that in 11 years, we've sold almost 500 million rand worth of work of Irma Stern, 487 million, Pierneef 216, Praller's 172, Kentridge 106, and then it tapers off quite a lot to around the 60, 70 million rand level. All right, some of the South African artists, that the records that we've achieved over time with Irma Stern, very beautiful Pierneef that we sold 2-3 years ago, a still life record for Irma Stern, a beautiful Alexis Praller record at its time. It's since been improved to approximately 10 million, another Pierneef. And then just 2 works that we sold this year. And I'll come and I'll talk a little bit in a bit more detail about the challenges that we faced this year and what happened, and how incredibly important these 2 paintings were for us, and what they managed to do, not only for our own survival and confidence, but for the art market as a whole. We sold the painting on the right for 11.4 million, the Arab Priest, and the one on the left for 14.8 million, the beautiful Tiger Lily still life, which were both very good prices to achieve, especially given current conditions. So if we then have a look at at what happened with COVID-19, it really presented a major challenge to us, because we have a program in which we have 5 live sales per year. And a typical live sale would be something where we send a very smart catalog of, quite big and heavy, with several pages, 200-300 pages, with beautiful photographs of the works that's for sale, with detailed commentary on the history of the paintings, the explanation of the paintings. And that goes out to about 5,500 people across the world, of approximately 1,500 of them are overseas. And there's quite a long pipeline. Before you have a sale like this, let's say for the sale that was due to take place in March, we would have closed the consignments at the end of November the previous year. We would have spent beginning of December and December, beginning of January to complete all the catalogs. We would have had them printed in the beginning of or end of the January, first week of February, and we would have sold them out, send them out all across the world with a date on for the auction in the mid. It was due for mid-March. We had booked a hotel site, the Vineyard, which we booked for a whole week. We normally have parties beforehand. We have a cocktail event. We have 4 days of viewing. We have personal appointments by all the top collectors to look at the top works. We have lectures. We have an incredible program to try and promote the sale, which then runs live for a full day. So you can imagine what happened to us when the lockdown was announced, and just literally 10 days before we were due to have this auction. We fortunately, we did see it coming. So a week or 2 before that, we sat down and realized that the probability of the lockdown happening was quite high. And we took the difficult decision at the time to just postpone the sale to May, thinking maybe quite naively and hopefully that by May it would be business as usual, and we would be in some or another way be able to have a live sale. Obviously, that was not to be, and we sat down as a business and had a really hard think about what we should do in the circumstances. So we traditionally derived, as you would see from the numbers I showed you earlier, about 85 to 90% of our total sales per annum came, if not more, came out of the 5 big live sales. And the 9 online sales that we have in between only generated between 8 and 10% of our turnover per year. So you can imagine the challenge of all of a sudden realizing that you are not going to be able to hold these big banger live sales, and you have to most probably move everything online. So we at first realized that we had no choice, but then the more we started thinking about it, we realized that there was quite a big opportunity here potentially. So we had a strong online track record. We had 36 sales since 2013. We started the whole digital transformation program in 2019, to enable, capacitate our IT infrastructure and our digital platforms. We fast-tracked those. We made sure that all our staff work remotely and were safe, invested in, the necessary laptops and, IT infrastructure to enable them to work seamlessly from home. We then thought, okay, in these times, it's very important that we communicate internally very efficiently. And secondly, that we have to start communicating with our clients very to do. We also then took the decision that we are not going to lay off any staff. We're going to keep everyone, and we're going to try and hold exactly the same number of auctions that we planned this year, albeit in a different format than we did last year. So that was quite an interesting challenge, and we had a lot of conversations on the board whether the market would be able to carry 80 to 90 million rand sale online. We managed to convince the board that that is what we should do, and we realized that we needed to do quite a lot of work to transform the existing online platform that we had to something that was capable of handling an international bidding program on a huge number of items, and for, as I demonstrated a bit earlier, items that are of quite significant value. So we hired in some technology consultants in order to enable us to fix out how we could do that. We then teamed up with the international online platform called Invaluable, we integrated with them. It's very long coding late at night, and they were actually very good in allowing us to API with them and to match what we've had. And we decided we're going to do an online auction on our platform and a live auction on their platform at the same time. And we were going to do it with all of our people almost at home. So we will allow 3 people in the Joburg office, 3 people in the Cape Town office. We were going to be the auctioneers and the auctioneer clerks. Everyone else were working from home, and clients were bidding online, and they were bidding by telephone to various staff members who then connected with Zoom back to the Cape Town office. So people were bidding on Zoom and via people's homes. People were bidding online. It was crazy. And our server, even though we quadrupled the capacity, I'd never experienced so much traffic, and we came perilously close to falling over, but luckily we didn't. Everything worked extremely well, and we generated 85 million rand worth of sales in the middle of lockdown, with almost 500 new clients registering for the program. So we were absolutely, firstly deeply grateful, obviously, but we were astonished by the support that we got for this auction and for this program. And it was fraught with difficulty. We had 3 major collectors phone us beforehand to say that we are risking the credibility of South African art market. We'll never be able to pull it off. We'll never sell a stern online for 18 million. No one else in the world has done it. No one else in the world has ever done a multi-location live online sale. We knew all of those things. But, sometimes as South Africans, I think we're pretty good. If people tell us it's impossible, then we really want to get going and make it possible. And we did it, and we got the support of our clients, and that was absolutely incredible. Important for Strauss and our survival, but also for the South African art market and for art as an asset class in these times, that you could achieve almost a record sale in these conditions. What do we ascribe it to? Obviously, there were some really, really good paintings and highly collectible paintings on the auction. So the curation of the sale was important. But I think an incredibly important part was the communication program that we started. We realized that a lot of our catalogs were not going to get to the bidders on time. In fact, we had 80% of them locked out in various places. As soon as the lockdown happened, all logistics stopped, and our very expensive and very beautiful catalogs were locked up in warehouses all across the country, London, everywhere. And we then started the Zoom program at 4 o'clock every afternoon in the run-up to the auction, 7 days a week, in which we talk to our clients, firstly about the contents of the sale, about our decision to proceed with the sale in this basis, and then on subsequent to related objects. I also wrote a letter to every single major client that commissioned work or consigned work to us, explaining our decision to move forward in that and getting their approval to keep their works and not withdraw it. And I'm extremely grateful to say that all but one of the clients kept their works on the sale, and that was fantastic. So we had incredible support. The Zoom talks was quite nerve-wracking in the beginning. We did a whole capacity building program inside the company to teach a lot of the people that work at Strauss are, older than me, I'd say, and that's dangerous. And we had to teach people how to, have a completely different relationship with technology than they had before. Sharing with Zoom, participating in these talks, talking to the public, and so on. And I mean, all in all, it was an incredible learning curve. And I just put some stats here. We've had 92 Zoom talks since starting this program. We've reached 6,800 participants at the talks, and almost 75% of that number afterwards of people who downloaded it from our website on the YouTube. We generated almost 35,000 minutes of content, and in the process almost redefined ourselves, created the huge awareness of the company and of our products. And I just showed you where you can either download it on our website, and you're very welcome every day, weekday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We've just had one. You can dial into a Zoom talk where we not only talk about ourselves, but about museums, the art world. And last night we spoke to a very famous winemaker in France regarding some of the wines that we are selling on our sales. It is incredible, and Ruth and I discussed it earlier today, how generous people actually are with their information and their willingness to share in these times. Maybe a good harbinger for the future. So why do I say, and I'm conscious of the time, why do I say art is a good investment? We must remember that art has been a collectible for centuries. There's a very active primary and secondary market for art worthwhile, with strong annual sales. The sales, overall art sales, galleries, primary and secondary market in 2019 was $64.1 billion, albeit it was 5% down in 2018, and the 2017 was approximately 63.7 billion, but the highest we've achieved to date was 2014 at $68.2 billion. So it's a massive international industry. And if you look at the figures that we realized per year, I estimate the South African art market to be between 1.5 and 2 billion rand per year if you take the primary and the secondary market into consideration. So we are really still very small by international standards. I think South African art is very collectible now for a number of reasons. South African art market is mature to a very great extent. We have great museums that have recently built up, and that allows us to have international quality shows that draw tourists to South Africa to look at art specifically. Our art fairs in Joburg and Cape Town have reached a maturity. They are of international standard, and they attract greater and greater scores of not only international visitors, but also international galleries. If you look at any criteria, I think the South African art, the modern and contemporary art, the art has been created since 1900, and today it's still actually very cheap, like our wine, by international standards. So the art ecosystem is very healthy. There's increased awareness of South African art. There's increased demand for that. What we've seen is that wealthy international South Africans are becoming an increasingly larger participant in the market, and that's very good. Heartwarming to see that lots of South Africans that have been living abroad for 20, 30 years are beginning to buy high quality South African art. And not only contemporary art, we have recently on the last sale sold Pyrenees to Americans, and to people who've been living there for second generation Americans, that their parents were born in South Africa and they want to buy. We sell Stearns to Australia, to lots of places in the world. So I think that is a good harbinger for the future. I think if you look at the numbers that we've shown, it has a non-correlation component to it, to what's happening to other asset classes. And I think lastly for me, and most importantly, art is something really it's very special. It broadens the mind, it enriches the soul, it rewards the bold. It speaks to the best, the most creative in us. It's a cause for celebration and positivity. It's a celebration of the bounty of life. And that's why I think there will always be a very significant inherent value in art. So Theo, that is me on the art side for now. So
Frank, thank you very much. I think it was it certainly enlightening. I fully agree with your last number of points. It is certainly a great diversification within a portfolio. I agree that if you have knowledge and if you do your homework, it is certainly an asset class that will not necessarily perform in line with other asset classes. What is interesting is, I think you note the pickup late last year. I think there was late last year in all investment markets a positive feel about the economy. My question to you, and then certainly a great piece of art is a lot better to look at and to enjoy than any investment statement, no matter how well it's done. A great piece of art is nicer to look at. My question to you, Frank, is more to do with, you've moved very successfully into the online space from a traditional, very much a traditional space, yes, with online elements. Do you foresee that in a post-COVID world, how will that pendulum swing back? Will the mix permanently change, or is art still something that people would like to enjoy when they look at it physically before they purchase it? Or what's your feeling about that?
Look, firstly, I think people would like to live with the art. So they're always going to, it's always easier to actually physically see something that you're going to bring into your personal space. So to that extent, there will always be a demand on the more expensive work for people to engage with it one-on-one. So I think live sales around the high-value items will always be a component of it. But I don't think, Theo, we will ever go back to a live sale only. I think even in future, if we have a live sale with people at it, we will also run it concurrently with an online program. So I do think from that point of view, the art world has changed and it will continue to change. I don't see us going back to having live sales only. All sales will either be a hybrid or pure online, definitely. I don't know if that answers your question. So I do think we've now, since we've been so successful in this sale, all the major companies, Christie's, Sotheby's, and Bonhams, have announced that they're going to do the same. So I think it's a new trend. If you look at what's happening with art fairs this year, because, I mean, to many countries, they still ban, they all moved digital. And they have online viewing rooms. People are talking more and more about the role of virtual reality in the art world. So I think we will have some aspects of the past with us, but we're definitely going to be a very different industry going forward.
Right, and then perhaps if there's any questions at this point in time, anybody with a question, just make sure you unmute yourself and we can see you. Is there at this point any questions?
Frank,
yeah, see you.
Rolf here. Why specifically your decision to include wine?
Look, you know, I believe that in all the business I'm involved in, there is something that I like a lot. So needless to say, it's not difficult for an art collector to become, you know, involved with the auction house, albeit it's a bit like having an alcoholic in charge of a liquor store. You have to, it's very, very tempting to buy everything yourself. But you know, I think South African wine is fantastic. And the penny dropped for me when I saw, when the Canonco Paul Sauer won in Tim Atkins' report. First South African wine that's currently still for sale that has done so. Actually, on other platforms, one or two other wines has reached the same milestone. But it's the first time on a major international platform for wine that's currently for sale that we got 100 marks. And I read the whole report, and then I realized that the average price per bottle of wine that got 100 was 480 euros. The most expensive wine was 3,200 euros a bottle. Canonco at that stage sold at 480 rand a bottle. 485 euros, whatever the number was at that point in time. It was the cheapest wine by far. And I just thought, gee whiz, you know, we can't continue like this. I also make a little bit of wine, not like Nick, but if we make wine from our farm. And, you know, you just realize that the wine that we make and sell for 100 rand or so, you would really have to spend a couple of 100 rand overseas to find the equivalent quality. Excuse me. So I then started talking, and I needed a partner, because it's no good just loving wine. You need to have someone that's got real expertise in evaluating wine and knows where all the good wines are to be found, and to have the ability to test these wine and make sure that if we put it on our platform, that it's still in fantastic quality. And I then looked around, and by chance occasion, I met Hugo Jacobs, who's the leading sommelier in South Africa. He was chairman of the South African Sommeliers Association. He served on the World Sommeliers Association. And I pitched this idea to him, and then he suggested that we join with Wine Cellar, who is the biggest sort of wine storage and old wine selling company in South Africa, trading company at that point in time. Yeah, and then it sounded like a good idea. We had a bit of a slow start. Didn't get a lot of support from the industry originally, because they didn't know it last. And I'm happy to say it's really grown very, very substantially. As I said, the last 3 sales that we've had, the last 4 sales, we sold 97, 100, 99, and 100% of all the wines. And in the process, they moved the record for South African wine on auction from just under 1,000 rand a bottle to over 2,700 rand on average per bottle of South African wine that we sell on the auction. Now we have to be realistic. We are selling 1 or 2 cases of wine kept in perfect condition. A lot of it actually produced between 1990 and say 2000. These are not wines that you can access that easily. you know, I can't see tons and tons of those wines coming onto the market in a way that have been kept that meet our criteria. So one have to be careful to now say that all South African wines are going to be re-rated as a result of that, because we're very careful. But it does certainly demonstrate the pricing capacity that's there for great South African wine in great condition. And a lot of these wines have been tested now by Tim Atkin and other winemakers, and they rate them as good as the Bordeaux of the same time, which are still priced at multiples of that level. So I'm personally extremely delighted with how it's went, and I'm really, really very excited where we're going to go. And I think we have the ability to transform the perception of South African art internationally through this initiative, or we're going to try to anyway.
Just a quick one on Frank, on the wine. The buyers, were they local or also were there also international interest?
I'd say 90% local, Theo.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Ja, Hugo Venter hier so van 12 Cape, Frank. Kan jy my hoor?
Ja, ek hoor jou, Hugo.
Ja. Man, ek wil net vir jou sê, kyk, ons tagline by ons plek is proudly local, maar world class. Alles wat ek gehoor het, nee, is wat jy nou net gesê het, proudly local, world class. Aard, wyn, alles. En ek is, jy weet, dit is so 'n ding wat ou baie trots op wees. Ek het 17 jaar oor see gebly en teruggekom en ek sien hierdie goed raak. Wat ek graag sou wil hoor, jy het nou gesê nou net daai laaste vraag, 90% Suid-Afrikaanse mense. Sorry, ek sê maar Afrikaans, my Engels is nie goed soos Roelse nie. Maar I'll try. And I'll 90% of sales is South Africans buying it. What is your views and thoughts on how the world is viewing these? You've already said how great our art is and wine is. What is the future beyond COVID on where South Africa sits within not only art, wine, but also tourism? You can touch on it next. You know, coming to visit South Africa, what's your view on the future for South Africa and all these things that I view as proudly local, world class?
I think you actually put your finger straight on it, Hugo. I mean, I am involved in the tourism industry, and I've been involved in the tourism industry forever, because I believe, as with our wine, it's almost exactly the same case. South Africa presents one of the best value for money opportunities in the world, best countries to visit. Even though we've become more expensive in recent years, I think, because of the local inflation patterns, but we're still on a rand for rand basis, on a room for room basis, on a safari per safari, on a meal by meal basis, wine by wine basis. We are an absolutely incredible value for money destination. And we were always very careful when I was involved with South African tourism by not ever presenting South Africa as a cheap tourism destination. You don't want to go there. You want to go at an excellent value for money. Even if it's expensive, it's still excellent for value for money. So I really believe that we've got everything, all the ingredients to be a very sustainable and long-lasting tourism destination. So obviously, we are going through major challenges in that industry. We've been incredibly hard hit by everything that happened with the demise of international travel. That's obviously caused major disruptions in the market, and a lot of businesses that are tourism related closed down. A lot of them, to be honest, laid off a lot of staff, gone into hibernation mode, because at one stage it was looking like we would only resume international travel in and around February next year. On the business side, business shut down completely. We're all Zooming and not traveling. So clearly the business hotels are facing major challenges. How I see it is that South Africa will remain a high quality tourism destination. We just need to get through this blip. When I'm part of a forum where sort of ex or senior tourism people get together to talk about these things, and we made a presentation. We also a meeting with the minister where we explained the enormous impact of the tourism industry on South Africa. We are 3% of the GDP, but we employ almost 4.5% to 5% of all employees in the country. And if you look at the knock-on effect of how many people we employ in the restaurant industry and so forth, we employ a very significant number of people in South Africa. And from a leisure tourism point of view, it's important to remember that we pay them with money that was generated outside this country. We're not just circulating money from one industry to another in the leisure side. To a large extent, we bring new money into the economy. So it's a massive wealth creator. And that we needed to be much more proactive in trying to manage the space and the perception of the country to ensure that that leisure tourism will resume as fast as it's safe and possible to do so. At the first meeting, I can share with you, Minister McKeezy said he's not interested in talking to our guys because it was tourists that brought this sickness to South Africa. And as far as he's concerned, we'll be last thing that he opens. Now, obviously, what can one say? Except that to go back and decide we needed to do a hell of a lot of lobbying work in terms of changing people's perceptions about the industry. And, you know, you saw last night, I mean, we then effectively bypassed them all, managed to pull in a select group of the biggest companies, went and bypassed everything, went to see the president directly through the Business Leadership South Africa Forum, explained the case of tourism, explained the importance of tourism, explained what was happening with the loss of capacity and everything in the industry, that we're in a competitive industry worldwide. If we're the last to open, we don't care. We're never going to regain the market share. We can take very long. I think he understood it very well. And yeah, you know, we'll see where we are with everything right now. But I believe we're in for another tough couple of months. On business tourism side, I think it's going to take a while before people resume their normal business travel patterns. On the leisure side, it will really depend on a lot of things. Airlines all over the world are in difficulty. As much as everyone crows for the demise of SAA, obviously from a tourism point of view, it's not great for us at all because they were a major, reliable and consistent source of bringing South Africa, tourists to South Africa. So somebody has to step into that space and it's going to take a while. It doesn't help that Comair is not doing so well either. So I don't know if any of you flew recently, but I tried to fly to Joburg 2 weeks ago and they charged me 10,000 Rand for a business class, for an economy class seat. And that, you know, wasn't, you know, that's definitely an inhibitor for traveling. So yeah, I think, Hugo, we are facing some challenges, but ironically enough, again, across the world, we are seen as a country that's handled this very well. And if I just take one proxy, if I look at Grootbos or some of the other places I'm involved in on the leisure tourism side, and we look at the deposits that we held and how many of these deposits were actually called up by people wanting to cancel rather than to defer. And so as industry, we realized that we have to offer people the opportunity to defer their holidays and keep the price the same or even incentivize them in order to retain their deposit. Not only for the money, but once a person has paid your deposit, he's got a very high chance or probability that he'll return to your country to come and visit. So we did that, and I think we retained almost 70% of the deposits. And talking around the industry, that's really the average are between, the lowest I've heard is about 35%. And I think that bodes well for, if things open up, for a more speedy return to some normality than we might otherwise have expected.
Thanks, Frank. I just want to add, you know, at our place we have, you know, it's not a big venue, but we have foreigners have been staying there since before lockdown, from America, from Austria, France, Germany, and they have been there nearly 4 months now. Call it because they were there before lockdown started, and they can't be happier because they're paying in dollars or euros, and they cannot stop telling us how wonderful place we've got because they've actually stayed a bit longer than they intended to. So just as a positive comment as well regarding, you know, the view of foreigners of the country. So thanks a lot for positive views.
Before we take a further question, Frank, just a point. You make a clear distinction between business travel and business tourism and between leisure travel and leisure tourism. Things like conference industry and big events. Do you have any view on that or any insights into that industry?
Yeah, that's not really a billion-dollar question, Theo. I listened to some talks that they had on the sort of international MICE industry initiatives, and people are talking a good story, but I am personally quite nervous about how long it's going to take before we have such a congregation of people in a small place. Because, you know, those conventions are all about networking, and it's all about the catering and all those sort of things. So if you can't do that, you have to stay apart and all those sort of things. I don't know how quickly people will resume to thinking that that is an efficient way to market themselves or get to know other people in the industry. So I think that industry is going to have to be extra creative in recapturing the market they had, if I can put it to you mildly. I think that's a long return, I think, my view.
Okay, let's open the floor. Any questions, first of all, either on the art market, the wine market, or the, let's say, the tourism, travel and leisure market? Is there any questions? Any person with a question, just come online, please. Let me, Frankton, just take it from there. If you look at South African art, so something that for me is interesting is that the small percentage of South African sculptures that are usually viewed in the same light as some of our let's say, our painters. Any view on that? Is that international trend, or is there a specific reason that South African sculptures, although there's some lovely artworks, is not always in the same price range or in the same value range than some of the painters?
Yeah, I think very, very good question, Theo. And there's no rational sort of argument for why sculpture should be less collectible than paintings. But all over the world, it is a relatively common phenomenon. I think partly because a lot of the really top sculptures in the world are quite large. They require a significant space, and per definition are acquired by institutions, museums, etc. People need a lot of space to do them. But that's not really an argument for much smaller works. You would be happy to know that we sold an amazing Van Gogh sculpture that was done by of Paul Kruger, of all people. Well, Paul Kruger, that used to belong to the Oppenheimer family. They donated it to the Rand Club, who then sold it, to expand or to do whatever. And we sold it for almost 10 million Rand. Unbelievable work. And it was bought by an Englishman, Ewoud. So, and for me, that was such an eye-opener. It was such an important event. But before that, I think the most expensive sculpture we sold on auction was like 5 million. It was an enormous Ewoud Villa structure. I know of some of the big works of Villa that sold for 8 to 10, around the 8 million Rand level, but definitely nothing to that before. So I hope it would lead to a re-evaluation of sculpture as an art form. In fact, in the subsequent sales, we sold a number of sculptures in the 1.5 to 3.5 million Rand range. So, yeah, it is a historic South African given. It's a bit of a world phenomenon, but hopefully, I think the high quality works will distinguish themselves. And we are seeing on certain sculptures, especially Khumalo, Legai, the black sculptures, as well as Ewoud Villa, and younger sculptures like Wim Botha, we are seeing a very strong demand for their work.
All right, I'm going to have another few questions. I think we've taken more than enough time, or we've taken a lot of time from Frank, and I think it was yet again incredibly insightful. So yeah, I'm going to give a last round. Is there anybody with any questions, any further questions for Frank?
Frank, it's Ewoud here. Thanks very much for a great presentation. Maybe just from my side, what would you say makes South African art unique on a global scale? And do you think that the art that we have in South Africa has the ability to be even bigger than what it is at the moment if it's marketed correctly?
That's a very good question and not so easy to answer. But I'll say to you the following. The South African contemporary art are one of the most collectible categories of art in the world today. There are several young South African artists that are on every major art fair in the world, sold out, represented by major South African galleries. And I think in the art world is a trendy place. And, you know, if you're on the wrong side of the trend, it's a horrible space to be. If you're on the right side, it's easy business. But right now, there's a very strong demand for African art. And South Africa, young South African artists fit into that mold. And they're promoted very aggressively as people are looking across the world to expand their collections from sort of more conventional countries and conventional points of view. People are looking for new points of view, interesting the LBGT voice in the world. There are a lot of artists that are presenting that voice, and they're doing incredible work, and they are highly collectible in the world now. So I think a lot of people realize in the past that you know, marginalized communities and those sort of things, they need to be heard and seen, and people are collecting works by them, and that's helping us. The second thing, what is happening is with the increased focus on contemporary art, people have to ask themselves, what happened before 2000? Clearly, South Africa must have created artists before that. It didn't just start in 2000 with people producing works now. And South African art was basically cut off after 67. It's interesting, we just after used that. But after 1967, South African artists got progressively cut off from the rest of the world because of apartheid. And they only started being reintroduced into the world in the late 80s with some of the struggle art. Jane Alexander, or, you know, Kentridge benefited from that. And some other artists were becoming well known as for their protest art. Now people are looking at it and say, okay, what did you do with abstract expressionism in South Africa? What did you do with, you know, modernism? How did you treat, you know, a lot of the Fauvism? How did you treat a lot of the art movements? People are curious, and they come to the art fairs, and it's interesting talking to major art collectors. Say, wow, I see so many South African artists lived and worked a long time overseas, and they were very much in contact and in dialogue with what was happening across the world, and they created works within a South African slant to it that responded to what was happening with, whether it's Cubism or abstract expressionism, as I said, or modernism. I mean, and people are really actually amazed to see the quality of work that we generated in that time. But all over and above that, I think what is interesting to people is the authenticity of addressing South African light and landscape and how they see it. And it was interesting for me talking to a British lord when we did a show of some top works of Pinnev and Stern in London 2 years ago. And he collects Pinnev of all places. And he said, and I asked him why he buys Pinnev. And he said, because, you know, as a child, his family loved South Africa. He came to South Africa a long time. And he said he captures something of the essential nature of the South African bush and landscape as it is, without people in it. He feels a very instinctive connection to that. If he looks at a painting, he sees Africa. You know, a lot of people see the same of Stern. She's collected all over the world now because she's a perfect mix of what German Expressionism focused on Africa and Africanist. It's still very Africanist for them, but painted in an idiom that they understand, Expressionism. So quality, a unique point of view. Nobody painted like Scottness did at woodcuts at that time, and painted wood like he did in South Africa. Nobody, you know, there's a lot of South African artists. Stanley Pinker, in his own way, integrated so many different art forms. Robert Hutchins was, even though he was born in England and lived his entire life here, now being recognized as good as any of his peers in England. So the more visibility our artists are getting, the top ones of them, the more they're rising to the equation and the greater the market for them becomes. I would say we sell in Cape Town more than 25% of the top works now to non-South Africans. And that is going to hopefully increase over time. I think that's a very good omen for us.
Frank, if I look at the artists that make up your pie chart in terms of value, and as you rightly note, there's only one of them that's currently alive today, and there is a usual trend that people get more recognized once they passed away. If you look at the younger artists in South Africa, young and upcoming artists, are you excited? Is there great talent coming through, or how do you see that?
enormous, Theo. I mean, the prices being achieved by some of the emerging South African artists relative to their peers are just incredible. You know, if you want to buy a Maholi photograph edition 1 of 30, you're going to pay $20,000 to $30,000 for it. You know, she had 4 massive works at Venice Biennale last year. She was almost a featured artist, and I think any of these things would have cost you 2 to 3 million rand for a huge photograph. Now, not even David Goldblatt generates that amount of income yet. So, yes, there's definitely, you know, contemporary art is a, as I said, a trendy thing. We are very trendy right now. It's a dollar-denominated game, and people are getting, you know, really serious prices for their work. Obviously, you have to deliver consistent quality if you want to stay in those brackets. And I guess that is the challenge, to deliver original work with strong creativity and of very high quality to sustain those prices and to sustain the tailwind that they have. But I think in the long run, it is very beneficial for the older artists, because they have not had the benefit of that in their lifetimes. But as there are more exposure of their work and the recognition of the international quality thereof, it will be good for everyone, Theo, in the end. Obviously, the weaker rand also helps. You know, it's not helps if you're a South African collector, because in dollar terms your collection doesn't grow that much. But you know, definitely there's a very exciting and a very broad bunch of South African, young, emerging South African talent that are regarded as peers in the world. I think I think in the last 5 years, we've had 3 South African artists as Deutsche Bank Young Artists of the World. That is something.
That is absolutely incredible. Rolf, I think we've taken an hour, and I must say probably this was one of the more interesting hours I've spent in a very long time. And I think not only was it educational, but I think it is incredibly positive to look at the industry that sometimes from an investment side one is aware and one dabble here and there, but to really look at how the industry is actually world class is something else to experience.
Thank you.
Johnny, Theo, I agree with you. I must congratulate Frank on moving so quickly and effectively, actually leading the world and getting art electronically on a platform. And what I've also take from that is how important it is to regularly communicate and talk to your clients, even inform them what you are busy with, especially in these times. Theo, is there anything that you want to maybe conclude with?
No, I just think that we will, as the world changes, one will have to appreciate that the true normal that we're going to end up is not going to be the same as it was before, and is probably not going to be what it is now. And it's just a theme that I think we need to take cognizance of, as a theme that's coming to the fore more and more from an investment and from a business point of view, is stakeholder capitalism as opposed to shareholder capitalism. And I think we can, in later programs, we can talk about it, but stakeholder capitalism is a broader concept. And I think it was kind of hijacked in the 60s or in the 70s by Milton Friedman, who kind of steered the world towards a capitalism is good, more free market enterprise. And I think we're going to see a bit of a move back to more responsible stakeholder capitalism with emphasis on people, sustainability, governance, the planet. But at some later point, we can talk about that in detail. At this point, I think this was just a lovely hour, and I don't want to. I think we need to internalize what was said. I think it was an incredible hour.
Yeah, Theo, as I said, I agree. Ewoud Derksen, can I ask you to do the necessary?
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. Rolf, again, to you and the Van Maverick Roberts team for organizing yet again another, what was today really an insightful discussion, and certainly one that that was a little bit more left field, I would say, than some of the others that we've had. And so thanks again for organising that. And also Theo, for your valuable insights. As always, thanks very much. It's very much appreciated by all of us on the line here. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ewoud Derksen. I'm Managing Director here at 1001 Voices. We're a private equity fund backed exclusively by families predominantly from the United States. And then obviously to Frank. Frank, very much for your insightful comments. You know, the art industry as a whole is almost somewhat has somewhat of a mystique element to it, but I think a lot of us don't really have that much exposure to, and I think it's that mystique that makes it such a fascinating industry. And thank you for giving us a glimpse today of what you get to deal with on a daily basis. And we could clearly all see the passion that you have for what you do on a daily basis. I mean, from a personal point of view, the only benefit I've always thought about as art, when I think about art as an investment, the investment industry is just the tax benefits. So thanks for opening it up to us, and again, thank you to Rolf and Theo and team.
Yeah, thank you very much, and that concludes our session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to you. Cheers, everyone.